On the night his daughter was born, Mr. Desmond was told she would never hear his voice. The storm slammed against the towering glass walls of the Desmond estate as Mr. Desmond ran through the marble hallway, his footsteps echoing sharply while fear twisted inside his chest. "Lillian, the doctor is here," he shouted, breath unsteady. Mrs. Lillian Desmond held their newborn daughter tightly in trembling arms, her lips quivering as she whispered the baby's name. But little Amara didn't cry. Not a sound. The doctor leaned close, tapping gently, speaking softly. "Amara, Amara, can you hear me?" His voice trembled as he tried again, but the baby's calm eyes stared into the distance, peaceful, silent, untouched by the world around her. The silence felt colder than the rain outside. Mr. Desmond swallowed hard. "Say something. Tell me she's fine, right?" The doctor hesitated before finally sighing. "Your daughter, Amara, was born deaf." The words shattered Lillian's heart. Tears poured down her cheeks as she pressed the baby to her chest, whispering prayers through sobs. Mr. Desmond's fists tightened as a storm of denial raged inside him. No, we'll fix this. Whatever it costs. I want my daughter to hear my voice." Just outside the doorway stood Obinna, the young gateman, quietly removing his cap as respect and sorrow weighed on his expression. He had served the Desmonds faithfully for years, disciplined, humble, almost invisible, but at that moment, something deep inside him ached for the silent child. As years passed, the mansion became a palace wrapped in quiet grief. Therapists, specialists, experimental procedures, all failed. Amara grew into a gentle child who learned to read lips and gesture with delicate hands. She never heard laughter, footsteps, or thunder, yet her smile could warm a room. She loved standing by the gate, waving at Obinna with bright, curious eyes. And Obinna always waved back. One afternoon, she ran toward the gate, silent laughter spilling across her face as she pointed at a butterfly dancing in the wind. Obinna knelt carefully, his voice soft though he knew she couldn't hear. "You like that one, Amara?" Her expression glowed as she traced the wings in the air with tiny fingers. From the balcony, Lillian watched, realizing Amara smiled more freely with Obinna than with anyone else. That evening at dinner, Desmond cleared his throat, eyes hard but hopeful. "We're flying to Germany next week. A new procedure. They say it could work." Lillian placed a trembling hand over his. "We've tried so much. She is happy. I want my daughter to hear my voice," he whispered, voice cracking. "Just once. I want her to know what I sound like." Amara watched their lips move, reading emotions she could not hear. And far by the gate, Obinna stared into the rain-washed night, guilt and a buried secret weighing on his heart. Time passed. Amara blossomed into a graceful young girl with thoughtful eyes. She communicated through signs and lip reading, and though silence shaped her life, she carried no bitterness. Lillian often brushed her hair in the evenings while signing to her slowly, and Amara would rest her head gently against her mother's shoulder. But Desmond never found peace. He spent fortunes on surgeries, implants, and overseas programs. Each failure sharpened his frustration until one evening he slammed his glass down, voice shaking. "Why our child? Why must she live like this?" Lillian flinched. "Desmond, don't let pain turn to anger. She deserves more than silence." Outside, Obinna stood still, pretending not to hear, but his eyes darkened with sorrow. Later that night, Obinna walked past the lantern tree in the garden and saw Amara seated beneath it, staring up at the moon. He approached quietly, sitting near her without a word. When she turned and saw him, her eyes brightened. She signed slowly, and though he didn't understand everything, he tried, always tried. He pointed at the moon. She smiled, tracing its curve in the air. Their bond deepened quietly, like a whisper only the heart could hear. But whispers travel. "The gateman is too close to the girl," one maid murmured. "It doesn't look right," another replied. The rumors slithered straight to Desmond. He summoned Obinna into the sitting room. "You are a worker in this house," he said coldly. "Keep your distance." Maintain boundaries. Understood. Obinna lowered his head. Yes, sir. Behind the stair railing, Amara watched, her heart cracking as his shoulders stiffened. From that day, she stopped going to the gate, stopped smiling. Even Lillian noticed. She misses him, she whispered sadly. Desmond looked away, unwilling to admit what he feared, that his daughter trusted Obinna more than him. Meanwhile, Obinna lay awake in his tiny servant quarters, staring at the ceiling while regret churned in his chest. Not simply because he cared for Amara, but because her silence was tied to a truth he had buried long ago. The tension inside the Desmond mansion thickened with every passing day. Amara spent more time alone in her room, tracing shapes in her sketchbook, the same curved symbols again and again, as if trying to speak through drawings. Lillian sat beside her one afternoon and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She signed slowly, asking if she was all right. Amara hesitated, her fingers trembling before she finally signed one name. Obinna. A tear rolled silently down Lillian's cheek. That evening, she went to the gate where Obinna stood watch. His posture straightened when he saw her, guilt flickering across his eyes. Madam, he said softly, bowing his head. She feels abandoned, Lillian whispered. You were her comfort, her safe place. Why does she trust you so deeply? Obinna's jaw tightened. His voice sank. Because I know what it means to live in silence. Before she could respond, Desmond stepped outside. His gaze hardened instantly. Obinna, back to your post. Their conversation ended like a door slammed shut, but fate had already chosen its moment. One stormy night, the power supply went out. Thunder rattled the glass frames as darkness swallowed the halls. A loud crash echoed upstairs, sharp and sudden. Lillian rushed toward the sound and found Amara trembling beside a shattered vase, her breathing frantic, her hands shaking too violently to sign. Her eyes held pure terror. Amara, Lillian cried, but the girl's chest heaved faster. Obinna burst through the doorway, without hesitation. He didn't think. He ran. Amara. His voice broke. She turned, tears streaming, and before anyone could stop her, she ran straight into his arms and clung to him like a drowning child holding onto air. Desmond froze. Time stopped. Amara buried her face in Obinna's chest, and for the first time in years she calmed. Her breathing slowed. Her shaking stopped. Her shoulders loosened as if his presence wrapped silence with safety. Desmond's expression cracked. Confusion, jealousy, heartbreak all at once. Let her go, he said quietly, but Amara refused to release him. She held tighter, fingers gripping his shirt in raw desperation. Obinna slowly knelt to the floor, with her still clinging to him. He placed a hand over his chest, then pointed softly toward Amara, then to the ground beneath them. A promise. I will always protect you. Lillian's voice quivered. Desmond, please just look at them. For the first time, Desmond didn't see a servant. He saw a guardian. Amara finally loosened her hold, but her eyes stayed locked on Obinna, pleading silently. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and stepped back, but emotion burned inside him like fire pressing to be freed. Because the truth he had buried was rising. Days later, Desmond called for an emergency family meeting in the sitting room. Lillian sat beside Amara, while Obinna stood rigid near the doorway. Desmond's voice was cold at first, defensive, but beneath it trembled fear. Explain to me, he demanded, staring at Obinna, why my daughter clings to you as if you're her lifeline. What aren't you telling us? Silence filled the room. Obinna's hands shook. He looked at Amara, then at the polished floor. There is something you must know, he said quietly. Lillian held her breath. Amara's eyes widened. Obinna swallowed hard, and his voice cracked. Years ago, just before Amara was born, I worked night security at the old northern residence. One stormy night, there was an accident, an explosion from the faulty power line behind the compound. Desmond stiffened. Obinna continued. You weren't home. Madame Lillian was pregnant, and she fainted from the shock of the blast. I carried her to the car and rushed her to the hospital. They said the stress and the impact affected the child's development. He lifted his gaze, guilt piercing through every word. I was the one who failed to secure the faulty unit that night. I was responsible for the incident that caused Amara to be born deaf. The room shattered into silence. Lillian's lips trembled as tears flooded her eyes. Desmond's breath left him like a collapsing wall. Amara stared at Obinna, not with anger, but with confusion and aching sadness. Obinna fell to his knees. I accepted blame, begged the manager not to reveal my involvement, so I would keep my job and continue sending money to my sick mother in the village. I stayed, not out of guilt alone, but because I swore to protect Amara with everything I had for as long as I lived. His voice broke. I never meant to grow close to her, but she found me, and every time she smiled, it reminded me that I owed her my life. Lillian covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Desmond trembled, fury warring with the truth that Obinna had risked everything to remain by their daughter's side. You should have told us. Desmond snapped, voice shaking. You carried this for years. Obinna bowed deeply. Punish me. Fire me. Send me away. But please do not take my presence away from Amara without saying goodbye. He turned slowly, tears falling. Amara stood. Her small hand trembled as she walked toward him. She placed her palm gently on his cheek, studying his face, then pulled him into a warm, trembling embrace. Her eyes filled with tears. Forgiveness. Not spoken, but understood. Desmond collapsed into a chair, burying his face into his hands, wounded and broken, torn between anger and gratitude. Because the man who caused his daughter's silence had become the only voice her heart truly heard. The air inside the mansion grew heavy after the confession. Days passed, but silence lingered. Not the silence Amara lived in, but the kind that wrapped itself around grief and guilt. Desmond barely spoke. Lillian moved gently through the house, watching both her husband and daughter like fragile glass. And Obinna remained at his post, quieter than ever, waiting for a fate he already believed he deserved. One evening, Lillian sat beside Desmond in the dimly lit study. The shadows stretched across his face as he stared out the window, shoulders weighed down by years of disappointment and loss. Desmond, she whispered softly, he saved my life that night. If he hadn't rushed me to the hospital, neither Amara nor I would be here. Desmond's voice cracked. And yet, because of his mistake, our daughter lives in silence. Lillian's eyes filled with tears, and because of his loyalty, she has never felt alone. He shut his eyes. He hated how true that sounded. Outside, Obinna stood in the rain with no umbrella, refusing to step away from his duty. The guards called out to him to come under shelter, but he ignored them. He felt unworthy of comfort. Amara watched from her bedroom window, her heart twisting painfully at the sight of him. She placed her palm against the glass. He stood there, drenched but unwavering. The next morning, Desmond summoned him again. Obinna walked slowly into the sitting room, expecting dismissal. He bowed deeply. Sir, if this is where it ends, I am ready. Desmond's jaw tightened. I'm transferring you to another branch outside the city, effective immediately. Lillian gasped. Desmond, please. It is final. Obinna nodded slowly. Thank you for allowing me to stay as long as I did. Amara stood at the staircase, frozen, her chest tightening with panic as his bag was placed by the door. She rushed forward, tears filling her eyes, signing rapidly with trembling hands. Don't go. Please. Stay. Her breath quickened. Her lips parted as if she wanted to scream, but no sound came. She grabbed his sleeve desperately. Obinna's hand shook as he gently cupped her cheeks. His voice broke. Amara, forgive me. Wherever I go, your safety will live inside me. She shook her head violently, pressing her forehead to his chest. Lillian sobbed. Desmond turned away, unable to watch. Obinna slowly stepped back and walked toward the gate. Amara collapsed to her knees on the marble floor, trembling, her chest heaving as silent cries tore through her. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. Lillian tried to console her, but Amara pushed away every hand that reached for her. She locked herself in her room, hugging her notebook tightly to her chest. She scribbled the same curved shapes again and again, the marks she always drew when she couldn't contain her emotions. Hours passed. Lightning cracked across the sky. The wind howled violently, and the storm returned stronger than the night Amara was born. Suddenly, a piercing alarm blared through the estate. The generators sputtered out. The lights exploded into darkness. The guard shouted outside. Lillian rushed from her room in panic as thunder roared through the compound. A loud scream of breaking metal echoed near the gate. The front gate's structural beam had snapped loose under the storm, crashing violently toward the courtyard walkway, right where Amara stood. She hadn't seen it coming. Her eyes widened. Her body froze. Then, out of nowhere, Obinna emerged from the rain like lightning. He had not left. He had been standing by the road, unable to walk away, watching the estate from afar, protecting them one last time. And now, he sprinted toward Amara with every breath in his body. Amara, his voice tore through the storm. He lunged forward, wrapped his arms around her, and threw his body between her and the collapsing beam, just as it crashed to the ground with a deafening, earth-splitting impact. Lillian screamed. Desmond ran. The guards rushed forward. The beam crushed across Obinna's back as he shielded Amara beneath him. The sound echoed through the courtyard. Rain poured over them. Obinna's breath trembled, pain burning through him, but his arms never loosened. He held Amara tightly, protecting her, just as he had always promised. Lillian fell beside them, sobbing uncontrollably. "Help him. Please, someone help him." The guards struggled to lift the beam. Desmond knelt beside Obinna, his hands shaking violently. "Stay with us. Don't you dare go." Amara trembled in his arms, tears streaming down her face as she touched his cheeks desperately. Then, for the first time in her life, her body broke through the wall of silence inside her. A sound erupted from her throat, raw, shaking, terrified. Obinna. Her voice tore through the storm. Everyone froze. The world seemed to stop moving. Lillian gasped, covering her mouth. Desmond stared in shock, because they heard it, a voice they had prayed for since the day she was born. Amara had spoken. She clung to Obinna, crying uncontrollably, her voice weak but real, filled with fear and love and desperation. "Obinna, don't leave. Please don't leave me." The words were broken, uneven, shaking, but they were sound, real sound, and it echoed through the courtyard like a miracle carved from tragedy. Obinna's lips trembled as he slowly opened his eyes, tears mixing with rain. He smiled softly. He had heard her voice. At last, Obinna's breathing weakened, but he kept his arms wrapped around Amara until the guards finally lifted the broken beam from his back. He gasped sharply, pain ripping through his body as they carefully laid him on the rain-soaked pavement. Lillian clutched Amara tightly, tears pouring as she whispered, my baby, you spoke, you spoke." Desmond trembled beside them, torn between terror and overwhelming awe, his shaking hand brushing against Amara's face as if afraid the moment might disappear. Amara was crying harder now, each sound fragile and uneven, but every word fought its way out with sheer will. "Don't take him away," she begged, voice cracking with fear. "Obinna, stay." Her voice, her real, living voice. Desmond pressed a trembling hand over his mouth as tears escaped his eyes for the first time in years. "Amara, you spoke," he whispered, disbelief and gratitude drowning his anger, his grief, his pride, everything that once hardened his heart. The paramedics rushed through the gate, lifting Obinna carefully onto a stretcher. His eyes fluttered open again as Amara stumbled forward, grabbing his hand, refusing to let go. He looked at her with pain and love tangled into one fragile smile. He whispered weakly, "You've found your voice, Amara." She shook her head desperately, tears flooding her face. "No, you gave me courage. You always made me feel safe." Her words trembled like broken glass, yet they were beautiful. Lillian sobbed into Desmond's shoulder, shaking, unable to process the miracle unfolding before them. Desmond moved closer to Obinna, gripping his hand firmly. "Hold on. You're not dying. Not after everything. Not after this." Obinna looked at him, not as a boss, but as a father who finally saw the truth. "I never wanted forgiveness," he whispered faintly. "Only the chance to protect her, to make my mistake mean something different." Desmond's voice broke completely. "You didn't just protect her," he said through tears. "You saved her, and you stayed when everyone else would have run." The ambulance doors closed as Obinna was rushed away. Amara watched, trembling in silence. But now her silence was no longer empty. It was filled with sound she had finally learned to break. Hours later, the family waited anxiously in the hospital hallway. Lillian held Amara close while Desmond paced restlessly, his mind spinning between fear and regret. When the doctor finally walked out, they rushed toward him, bracing themselves. "He's alive," the doctor said gently. "His injuries are severe, but he's stable. He'll recover with time." Lillian collapsed in relief. Amara's tears returned, this time out of hope. They were allowed into the room one by one. Obinna lay weakly on the bed, his breathing steady but soft. Amara stepped forward slowly, her hands shaking as she reached for him. He opened his eyes and smiled faintly, tears forming at the corners. "You stayed," she whispered, voice fragile. "I always will," he replied softly. Desmond approached the bedside and bowed his head, not as a master, but as a humbled man, asking forgiveness. "Obinna, I wronged you. I blamed you for my pain, and ignored everything you sacrificed for my daughter. From this day forward, you are no longer just a worker in my house." He paused, then placed his hand gently over Obinna's. "You are family." Obinna's eyes flooded with tears. Lillian nodded, voice trembling softly. "Our family is whole because of you." Amara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his hand, whispering softly through tears. "My first voice was your name." Obinna closed his eyes as emotion washed over him. Weeks passed. Obinna recovered slowly, supported every day by the Desmond family. Amara spent hours learning to strengthen her speech with therapy, but she never forgot the moment her heart found sound, the moment courage shattered silence. One peaceful evening, the family gathered under the lantern tree where Amara and Obinna once shared quiet moments of comfort. The sky glowed gold, the breeze gentle, the world finally calm. Desmond stood up, clearing his throat, but his voice carried warmth now, not tension. "Life gave us a storm," he said softly, looking at Obinna. "But you became our shelter." Obinna lowered his head humbly. Amara stepped forward, smiling shyly as she spoke slowly, each word careful but steady. "Thank you for never leaving me, even when you could have." He smiled back. "Thank you for finding your voice when I needed to hear it most." They hugged, a bond stronger than blood, deeper than forgiveness. As the evening breeze whispered through the garden, Amara turned toward the horizon, her world no longer silent, but filled with courage, love, and sound born from sacrifice. And if you felt every heartbeat in this story, if you connected with Amara's journey and Obinna's loyalty, then don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Because more unforgettable stories are coming your way.